All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. Big Dog Brett, thanks so much for tuning in. Today we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Dean Legge from Dog Post. Really appreciate you coming on today, sir.
Hey Brett, how are you, man?
Well, back-to-back national champion, so I'm pretty good.
Yeah, it's quite an event, that's for sure.
Well, we really appreciate you guys and all you do over at Dog Post. You guys put in a ton of leg work and a ton of homework. I know how much work that can be just for one person to try and cover. There's no way one person can do what you guys do. It would be impossible. So I think you guys really help get the information out as to what's going on at with the University of Georgia and the players and the recruiting. You guys have a great team over there, and we appreciate you doing all that and taking the time to be with us. So
I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
yeah. Uh, so we've been going back and forth with a couple of different people about Stetson Bennett, and I wanted to get your opinion on Stetson Bennett. And of course, I'm going to contribute as we go along here. There seems to be a lot of people out there that are kind of stuck in the mindset that Stetson Bennett is a average to a little bit slightly better than average quarterback. I couldn't disagree more. I know there's I know there's Georgia fans out there that think the world of him, but it seems that you hear more from those that don't. So what's your impression overall, since you guys are so close to what goes on out there?
Well, a lot of times in life, not necessarily the media, but the media certainly is one aspect of life. What happens is people decide a particular thing, and they're not interested in wavering on what they've decided. They won't change. And if we were discussing Stetson Bennett from the Kentucky game in 2020, you know, he just wasn't very good at that time. But that's not what's happened. I remember very well how bad Matthew Stafford was his first year, particularly mentioning at Kentucky, how poorly he played in Commonwealth that night in 2000 that day in 2006. Stetson Bennett that we saw at the end of 2022 is not even close to the person that was the quarterback in 2020. So what happens sometimes is folks are looking at something and they say, well, it's daytime. And they'll say it's daytime and it's daytime for a while, but then it becomes night and they continue to say that it's daytime. Look, Stetson, the numbers don't lie. And he accumulated, I think, um, it was insane the numbers that he put up in the playoff alone.
Just the
And
playoff. Yep.
just the playoffs, and that's something that, uh, you and I were discussing the Manning Award in the time before we got on here. Here's what Stetson did in the postseason. So these are the 3 games after the regular season. Uh, 64 of 88 for 976 yards, 11 touchdowns throwing, 3 running, 1 interception. But I don't really know what else. That's just the postseason. In the regular season, he didn't play as well. I mean, for the whole season, excuse me, as he did in those 3 games, in those 3 championship games where there were trophies at play. He was 310 for 454. That's 68% for 4,172 yards, 27 touchdowns, and a team leading 10 touchdowns rushing.
What
It's
as the old
it's
saying goes, what
well,
what
but
more can you possibly do?
Well, you cannot make everyone happy, and in doing what I've done for 23 years, and even being married, I understand, and most people should, you cannot make everyone happy all the time. Um, what Stetson's critics or haters, however you wanna put it, are doing is allowing him to use them as motivation, and, the whole thing is ridiculous. The guy deserved to be at the Heisman Trophy ceremony, 100%. He deserved to win he earned winning the national championship the last 2 years. They don't win the national championship the last 2 years without Stetson Bennett making the plays he did in the 4th quarter of the Ohio State game and in the 4th quarter of the Alabama game. The defense in 2021 was superb. They were outstanding. Alabama scored a touchdown. So it all goes together. But this notion that Stetson isn't beyond average you know, you're fooling yourself. And at the beginning of the season, Brett, after they played Oregon, I mean, I've never had it out for Stetson, so I don't really care. You're supposed to call it like you see it. And after the Oregon game, I said, if he keeps playing like this, he's going to be in New York. He was, and he's going to get drafted. And we'll see if he gets drafted. My suspicion is that he will. I don't think
Well,
he's
I
going to
think
win
there's
Super Bowls.
I think there's 7 I think there's 7 or 8 NFL teams right now that either need a quarterback or are looking to make a change at a quarterback position. There's been multiple NFL teams that have tried using veterans and they're just not getting the results. So I think you'll see a lot more quarterbacks go in the draft this season than you normally see. Now, one of the things that you had brought up was how he performed postseason. If you look at the what I would consider the most important drives of Stetson Bennett's life, I would say that final drive against Alabama, where
Mhm.
the possession before he fumbled the ball. And you can call it what you want to. Mine and your opinion don't matter. What matters is what they called it on the field. They called it a fumble on the field. He didn't blame anybody. He took that on his shoulders on himself, and then he went 7 for 7 on the next drive.
Right.
Then in the final drive against Ohio State that we needed, he went 10 for 12. So in the hardest, highest pressure situations that you could put anybody under, never mind a 25, 24-year-old guy, he can go out there and perform like that. It's moments like that that we will always talk about. Well, the moment was too big for him. He choked under the pressure. A lot of people said that about Justin Fields when he got into the playoffs. They said he couldn't handle it. The stage was too big. Stetson didn't have that problem. I think that his performance improves the more pressure you put on him, which is incredible. I think his postseason accuracy rating was something like 72 or 73%.
Yeah.
Absolutely phenomenal. Now we can talk about Stetson Bennett all day long. 4 MVPs. He won every MVP postseason game he was in. Won every one of them. Heisman nominee. His total record is incredible. 4,100 plus yards, sacked 9 times. And here's the incredible part to me. Georgia did not have that 1,000 yard receiver. They didn't have that wide receiver. Now
Or
we can talk
rusher.
about what's that
Or rusher.
or rusher, right? So we had one guy over 775 yards. We had no wide receiver over 775 yards. Ladd McConkey was at 762. And by the way, Georgia's wide receiver room was not stacked and is not stacked with 5-star talent. We have Ladd McConkey who's a 3-star. He's a phenomenal player, but he's not a 5-star player. I love Ladd McConkey. I would do anything in our world to help that guy. Rosemy Jack Saint's only a 4-star. And the reason I bring these up is because if you want to compare Georgia's wide receiving room to Ohio State's wide receiving room, you got Emeka Ejigba, who's over 1,150 yards by himself. Marvin Harrison's over 1,200 by himself. USC has 5 wide receivers that are all 5-star talent. Alabama has 5-star talent all over the place. Washington is 2 yards away from having 2 1,100-yard rushers. And then their backup under that guy's Jalen Polk. He's right at 700. You look at LSU, they had 1,000-yard wide receivers in Malik Neighbors. You look at TCU, they had 1,000-yard wide receiver in Quentin Johnston. Georgia just didn't have that. Not that apparently we didn't need it, but when you start talking about Stetson Bennett and how well he done, it's not like he was throwing out there to NFL wide receiver talents all day long in the wide receiver room. They found a way to make it work with Ladd McConkey and uh, Brock Bowers. We did a great job, but he did a great job at it. So to me, the mentality that he's not that good of a quarterback, I would say that when you put him head to head, you put him head to head with Ohio State, and he beats CJ Stroud. Same amount of completion, same amount of attempts, 50 more yards in passing, and no 1,000-yard receivers. I don't know what else to tell people.
Well, but we're fi you're fighting uphill here because it is human nature once you've decided something that you've decided it, and people are not willing to change, and that's why there's so many people using typewriters to do the job that I do now, right? I mean, you have to understand that you can be wrong. I learned in my 30s not to be so certain of any one thing. And it's okay to let things play out and then you go from there. Uh, but our human hubris will not allow us to change our minds about things. Stetson Bennett is one of the greatest quarterbacks in college football history. Period. The results speak for themselves. I don't know Stetson Bennett the fourth. I don't know him. I mean, I don't care, but it's just true what it is. Is he more talented than Matthew or Aaron? No, but there's something that Stetson has besides his ability to run. It very well could be his maturity. I mean, Matthew and Aaron started at Georgia young, and
Yeah.
that was, they were young people even, and nevertheless
Yeah.
starting as true freshmen or freshmen. So, but at the end of the day, we've fallen into a trap in sports, I guess, but in society in general, and saying whatever I believed going into this thing, I can't change my mind. And I don't I just if people don't like Stetson, I mean that's whatever. I mean, but Kirby Smart has evolved for sure.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
evolved, and that's a good thing. I think in life you need to evolve, and it's okay to say something was true at this moment, and now that's no longer true. It's not 2020 anymore. In terms of the NFL thing, I understand that's a totally different ball game. I mean, no one's going to draft Stetson with the idea this guy's going to be our franchise quarterback. However, however, it is hard for me to say that Stetson's not as good or better than Brock Purdy with the Niners right now.
Yeah.
So when he gets his opportunity, if it ever happens, he's going to have to make the most of it. He has proven twice that he can do that. So we'll see. But I'm not, I don't. He has a particular skill set that is very good in the NFL these days. But at the end of the day, he won more than Johnny Manziel. He won more than Cam Newton. He won more about than anybody that's not named AJ McCarron. And he's a better quarterback than JT Daniels. He's the best quarterback that Georgia's had just in terms of overall skill in a while. I would still take Aaron. I would probably still take Matthew. After that, I don't know that I'd take anybody. And frankly, um, I'm not sure I would take those guys in college setting over Stetson. Stetson's a very, very good college quarterback. Very good,
Yeah.
elite.
So I wanted to touch base with on the stats for Aaron Murray. I love Aaron Murray. He's one of my favorite college football players of all time. Very down to earth guy. If you've ever met him in person, he's super chill, super
He
chill,
is.
family guy. All of the things are very similar to how I grew up, how I was raised. I've met him a couple of times. I really like Aaron Murray. Big fan of his when he was a quarterback. Now, there's really no Georgia fan out there that is familiar with Aaron Murray that will say he's a bad quarterback. If you watched Aaron Murray play, you knew he was not a bad quarterback. What I would tell people is that a lot of people have Aaron here and they have Stetson Bennett like down here, right?
Aaron doesn't think that.
I know Aaron doesn't think that, and that's because Aaron knows college football quarterbacking better than
he
most
doesn't.
people do.
He doesn't believe that at all.
I know he doesn't, and he's right. If you go back and you look at Aaron's stats, Aaron never had a year where he even breached 65% completion percentage. He never had a season where he threw more than 36 touchdowns. His overall QBR
That's
is
a
lower.
lot of touchdowns, by the way.
That is a lot of touchdowns, don't get me wrong,
Anything
but in
over 30
today's
is a lot.
but today's day and age, that's not as many as it used to be.
Right, that's true.
Um, but he only had one season where he broke 3,200 yards, and that was his junior season. He threw for almost 3,900. And so when you look at his completion percentage, he played in all 14 games that season. He played all 14 games the season before. I love Aaron Murray, but there's also that thought process that he was, tippy top of the mountain. And he holds a lot of awards, don't get me wrong. But I think that the I won't say hate, but I'll say the non-appreciation for what Stetson Bennett really was able to accomplish is grossly overlooked. So,
let me say this real quick though, Brett. Having lived in that time very closely too, you know, a lot of people were very, very critical of Aaron too. And part of this is just being a quarterback in the SEC. I mean, people would throw stuff at Aaron's house.
yep.
He had, I mean, it was Aaron had a hard time. I had to, this is not fun being a quarterback in the SEC. There's constant criticism. If you don't want to do it, you should go to a different school or a different lower level of football. You won't get the criticism. But Joe Montana in the 80s. Did people think he was exceptional in the 80s? I don't remember it that way. I think they were in love with John Elway. They were in love with other quarterbacks, but Joe Montana continuously won. I mean, it was not insignificant how often that Joe Montana won. Looking back on Joe Montana, people considered him the greatest quarterback in the NFL of all time until Tom Brady came around. Okay, what happened with Aaron too was people Georgia folks didn't really appreciate Aaron Murray until he did all he could do to win them that game in 2012 against Alabama. Only after that, only after three-quarters of his career was over, did the bulk of Georgia folks realize what they had in Aaron Murray. And when we are living through something and experiencing it, folks don't realize sometimes how good it is, and sometimes I think they can't tell how bad it is or can be. And I was there for the 2015 season. It was as bad or worse as people remember. And 2012, it was when Aaron earned his respect. But Georgia folks are elite at eating their own, and they cannot help it. It's what they do. It's the Larry Munson in them. But Stetson Bennett is as good a college quarterback as you're ever going to see. I mean, he just is.
I think Georgia fans have certainly been spoiled with Stetson the past 2 years and not
Yes.
realizing and appreciating him. And that's I'm gonna
And if they
pivot
had
here.
and when they had Jacob Eason, they were ready to kill Jacob Eason. See,
Yep.
I mean, he's not as good as everybody said. So this is just what folks do.
Yeah. So I wanted to go on the record to say, uh, ever since Stetson Bennett bounced back from the loss against Alabama, where he went out and we absolutely body bagged Michigan, I said, "Yep, this ride or die for me for Stetson." I was wrong. I apologized. This guy's got talent. So
Yeah.
Kirby obviously sees something that we can't see or don't see, and he's picking him. Then that's who I'm going with. Now you're never going to be able to argue pretty much any quarterback choice in the history of college football moving forward with Kirby Smart, because he and
Well,
Stetson.
but you could have in the past. See,
Yeah.
I mean, Kirby can't
Can't
win
now.
either. Kirby can't win either. And there's times to criticize Kirby. Don't get me wrong, but um, you know, they were right about Stetson. And the fact is, having played sports in college, how many hours you practice. It's evident who the person should be in practice. It just
Yeah.
is.
The
And
team
so
knows.
the team
The
knows,
team
and
knows.
they knew that it should have been Stetson, and that's who it turned out to be. And he, again, if they don't, if he doesn't play the way that he did in the fourth quarter of those two games, they do not win the national championships in those two seasons. They just don't.
Yep. I do want to pivot here for a moment. If you guys have been watching the news at all, you know that UGA suffered a heartbreaking tragedy with the loss of Chandler LaCroix and Devin Willock. They were in a car accident and unfortunately didn't make it through. There's two other individuals that were also in the wreck with them, but they're expected to be, to make a recovery. I'm not going to get into the events of what happened, but it was pretty bad. If you guys want to keep them in your thoughts and prayers, please do so. Our heart goes out to them and their families and everyone involved. So, um, just a heartbreaking event. So I do want to talk about. We've talked about what was at the Georgia quarterback position. Now let's talk about it. What will be. I obviously have my opinions. We talked a little bit beforehand about that. And I wanted to get your first person opinion of the quarterback position, who's likely going to play it, and how big of a gap is it between the players that are left as to running for that particular position?
Well, I don't think. I mean, it's pretty clear that Carson Beck has the inside track here. If he doesn't, then he will have lost it this spring to either Brock Vandagriff or Gunnar Stockton. I would be surprised though, because this will be Carson's fourth season under Todd Monken at Georgia. He has experience. He's played a lot of games. He played in 7 games last year, or 8, one of the two. He has statistics for 7 games. And when he played against Texas Christian, when he played against Vanderbilt, he looked good in those games. He almost started in 2021 when JT Daniels got hurt. The story behind that is, according to Todd Monken at least, is that they almost went with Carson Beck, but there were some injuries that week on the offensive line, and they were not as comfortable with that, and they went with Stetson. They were going to play both of them, and I mean, Stetson obviously outplayed him. He was the offensive player of the week for the country that year, or
Yep.
that week, excuse me, offensive player of the country that week in 2021 for the UAB game. But listen, folks inside the program are very optimistic about Carson Beck's abilities. The only thing we don't know is, can he do what you have to do to win and win national titles? And in other words, can he perform on the biggest stage the way that Stetson has? Now, the only piece of data that we have as it relates to that is him winning the state championship at Mandarin High School in Jacksonville, a school that is not known for winning. They win the state championship in the largest classification in Florida. It's, I think, believe it was the first time a school from Jacksonville had won in 7A in football in Florida. So he had to grow up. He's 4 years older. He had to uh, fight his way into the position. He had to decide not to leave. There's been a lot for Carson. It's just all been below the surface, and we're going to see what Carson's got. I think he's going to be a very good quarterback for Georgia. I just know that winning winning 29 out of 30 games, or whatever it would be, it'd be even more than that. Really, it'd be 43 out of 45 games for any program. That's asking a lot, and that's what it would require for Georgia to win the national championship in 2023. But Carson Beck can do it.
So, a little bit of information on Carson Beck for those who aren't necessarily that familiar with him. Carson Beck is 6'4", 215 pounds, a prototypical NFL style quarterback. The guy
Right.
has a big arm, and for his size, he is pretty quick. Now, I do want to point out some stats on him. He's this past season, 2022, his completion percentage was 74.3%. He had 4 touchdowns. His rating is 186. That's pretty much off the charts. The fact that this guy was sitting behind Stetson Bennett, waiting to play, is another indication of how good of a quarterback Stetson Bennett was. So Carson Beck, I think, is going to be he's going to surprise a lot of people because a lot of people don't know a lot about him. 2 years ago, when me and my cousin Keith, we went down to the G Day game and we watched Carson Beck sling the ball around. We both looked at each other like, that is an incredible guy. That's an incredible quarterback. Yeah. For those of you who don't go to the spring game, it's a great opportunity to see some of these players. Granted, it's not a full blown game, position, whatever, but you can really see some route running talent. You can really see some arm talent. Carson Beck's got a big arm. He can throw it a long way. So for those of you who have been waiting to see a quarterback who can throw a ball 185 yards, this is probably your guy. Because I know some of you guys don't think Stetson Bennett can throw at 5, but trust me, Carson Beck will be able to do it just fine.
He's going to have to play quarterback, which is
Yep.
something that does not require throwing it out of the stadium. Bryce Young was not Alabama's starter in 2020, and I would argue he's a better quarterback than Mac Jones. Carson Beck will have his chance to say, "Well, I'm a pretty good quarterback too." even though I did not start these last 2 seasons. And there is a lot of confidence about Carson Beck inside of Georgia's program. They think he's very good.
Yep. Real quick, I think you've been working on something for the past couple of years. I think you did a pretty good job with your prequel, and then you made the
And the
sequel.
prequel
Do you
is
have
this.
a copy of the prequel?
I have a copy of this
Yeah.
the original, whatever we're calling it these days. There's a picture of Kirby with the national championship trophy. Yeah, so DogStruction still available. People are still buying it. Big Dog Brett, I'll tell you, it's
Well, I think that
Jeff Foxworthy was correct. I'll say that. And
so I
then
think we're go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, I was going to say it stays right here. I keep mine
There it
up there.
is. Yeah, right
And
behind. Is that Atlanta? Let's see.
w-
So Perfect and Cheers. Which one is which for Atlanta there? I can't quite
so
see it.
Cheers is Atlanta because that's the Peach Bowl, and Perfect is when we beat TCU. That was 15-0 that for a
Okay.
perfect season.
Yeah.
And then
I was
over
on the
here,
field. Go ahead.
and then right here you can see the Sweet 16 one
Sweet.
right here. So
So I was on. I'm not going to say who passed those out because I know the person a little bit for the AJC. It was really funny to see them lug all those papers onto the field. I could not do that with Double Dogs. We had already established the cover. We here's some inside baseball for folks who are watching at this stage in the program. There you go. Hey, I don't even have to hold it up. We were not certain that this would be the cover right there. Um, I did not know if there would be an iconic moment in the there was an iconic moment in the Ohio State game, and that was when Ohio State missed that field goal. But that's hard to put on a cover, and it doesn't visually look as good as Stetson. You know what is that?
stiff arming somebody behind him
Yeah,
somehow.
yeah, forearm shiver. This play, is where Stetson spun around and eventually dove into the end zone and did the telephone gesture,
Right.
aka just like No Sean Moreno. So this is the sort of stuff that Georgia will be losing though with Stetson leaving is his ability to escape and about once a month or twice a month that really matters in games. It mattered in this game against Tennessee. It mattered against TCU. It mattered against Auburn in 2020. I mean, there are times when you really need Stetson's legs. You won't have that with Carson Beck. You would have that with the other two quarterbacks. We would not have that with Carson as well. But even those other guys, they can't. Stetson can really, really run. He's very quick. But we were not certainly going to go with this cover. Um, but I think it fits the season. With the exception of the Ohio State game, there was no game they played bigger than the Tennessee game, and they just shoved Tennessee's face into the dirt.
Well, I love to be able to razz my Tennessee friends whenever they start talking about how successful of a season they had. I say you guys couldn't even stay in first place for a week, so I don't want to hear it.
We
I mean,
could not believe when we were driving back from Kentucky or State. I can't remember. I think it was. I can't remember. We could not believe that score. I think it was that we were driving back from Kentucky. We could not believe they were losing to South Carolina like that. We could
yeah,
not. I
that
could not
was.
believe it.
I don't know what happened in that game. I don't know if Spencer Rattler decided to invoke football Jesus. I don't know what happened, but he got after Tennessee in a big way. And what it kind of reminded me of was whenever we used to play South Carolina and Steve Spurrier was the coach. I don't know what it was about Spurrier, but he just seemed to have Georgia's number. And it seemed like that day, South Carolina just had Tennessee's number, and there was nothing they could do to stop them. So,
I don't know
where
if
can
I.
you pick up?
Yeah, you can pick it up. There's only two places actually. You can get it in Athens at Red Zone, where everybody we've been talking about on Clayton Street downtown, or you can get it. Usually, I reference the link below, but it's in Double Dogs. You can just Google it, or you can go over to dogpost.com. It's in all of our articles. The code is in there. I can't really remove it. So You can get it that way, but I appreciate you mentioning it. One of these days, I will try to explain to people, um, like you were talking about the fourth quarter of the TCU game. I was inside making sure that all of the buttons were being pushed correctly for getting it backwards for this moment. Meteorologists really do have it hard. It's very difficult to go to reverse yourself. I'm pointing the wrong way right now, but um, I was very pleased that I was not waiting on Keely Ringo to run into the end zone for the close of a national championship game.
Yeah.
It makes it much easier when you know what's happening. But Georgia has a way of um, making you wait sometimes, and it's very it's something else. That Ohio State game was something else, man.
That was certainly an exciting game against Ohio State, and I've said it before, I'll say it again. Other than Georgia, the biggest winner in the Georgia TCU game had to be CJ Stroud, in my opinion, because look at how well he done or did, however, whatever, whichever proper English it's supposed to be, against Georgia. And then the team that was supposed to be the number 2 seed, look how poorly they did against Georgia. So I think that really boosted CJ Stroud quite a bit, because
Yeah.
when you compare those two games, that is the worst Georgia has beaten any team in several years. And that is the best performance I think Ohio State put on all season. So,
Or two. Yeah, I mean,
or
Ohio
two.
State
Yeah,
played great in that
they did.
game for sure. And they just lost. It happens.
So at the time of this filming, do you still have any confetti left?
I forgot about I actually do. Uh, but the problem is, and I should have mentioned that I have some confetti left. Um, the problem though, Brett, is that we're getting to the point here where if folks don't order sooner than later, they won't get the confetti. I thought I'd run out, but we did a confetti audit, um, and I'm
Got a
not
few
joking.
scraps?
I'm not joking. And so when we did that, it looked like I didn't have as much as it turns out that I did. I've got to get through the rest of the confetti. The main thing is people want the ones with the years,
Yeah,
and these were not very
plentiful.
pre- prevalent out there. There's obviously, if you just look at the confetti, again, confetti audit. If you look at the confetti, and you can compare it. There's a lot more non-years
Right.
than there are years, but this is just red and black confetti, so folks don't seem to understand. But I can assure you, there was a whole process. We had to dry it and all this. It was, and then like this is what some of the confetti looks like, and it should look like this. So
Gotcha.
it's a whole thing.
Well, it's realistically enhanced.
It was very wet. That was the one thing about that stadium, as nice as was it was raining into the facility, which was hard to understand. Even on the field, in the second quarter, I turned to the photographer left to me and said, "Is it raining in here?" And it was. And they obviously that's not something that you see very often, but it was raining sideways, and the mist was getting into the field.
Seems like poor planning to me. That's what it sounds like.
It's
And
well,
I'm just,
maybe, but $5 billion facility and it's raining inside.
we have a dome, but it's okay because it rains inside.
It was open though. I let people know ahead of time. It's cold in here because it was in the 50s abnormally for Los Angeles at the time. It was in the 50s, so it was a colder game than they expected. And then, of course, the rain was just bizarre.
Right.
I don't think that's ever happened there, frankly, but it did
That was
that day.
that was pretty incredible. Well,
Very incredible.
that's all I really have for today. If unless you've got something else you want to throw in there, Dean.
No, I appreciate you having me on, and we'll do this again sometime soon.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I really appreciate everybody stopping in. We want to say thank you to Dean Legge and Dog Post and all they do over there. Don't forget to go by dogpost.com and order your copy of DogStruction. If you can't get to the website, try to get to the Red Zone in Athens. They have
Yeah.
copies on hand, and those are some great people over there too. Stop in and talk to them. They're always willing to have a conversation with you. Really, really nice people. So
How long
really
is it
appreciate.
going to take you to get to these 10,000? Why are people not subscribing to your channel? What are they doing?
I well, the channel is growing, but it's not, I guess, growing as well as I would like.
Oh, you're
I was
being
at
self-critical now.
well, modesty, I guess, trying to be
It's tough
humble.
out there. Yeah.
You get out over your skis. When I first started the channel, I was pretty brazen, and I wanted to make the channel better, make the channel better, make the channel better. So, um, I guess now's a good time as any. We're looking at potentially updating the name of the channel to something
Oh,
a little different, and we'll talk about that offline. But we're also
no.
going to be updating the backdrop as well, making
Yes.
some real changes. So it's going to be exciting. By the time we start next season, all of this will be different. All of this will be different. So,
He's stepping
well,
his game up.
yes, sir. If you guys would, please hit like, subscribe, and share. Leave your comments down below what you think about Stetson Bennett, the upcoming quarterback situation, whether or not you have purchased Dog Post. And if you say no, I need you to tell me why. Uh, Reach out to Dean. He's always willing and able to talk to you guys. He's very busy, but he's always willing to
That's
help out if
true.
he can. So
That's
really
true.
appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. You guys have a great day. God bless. Go Dogs.